In the Superbet Rapid and Blitz Championship, our favorite Vishy Anand is playing excellent chess. He has already won the Rapid section and is doing well in the Blitz section. But my attention was caught by a clean attacking game by Fabiano Caruana, which he played yesterday against Wesley So. This game is a model game on how to exactly attack with opposite side castling. Let's enjoy this beautiful attacking game by Caruana and learn something from it. So Wesley started with the move e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight f6, the Petrov defense. This is Caruana's pet line against the first move e4, knight into e5, d6, knight f3, knight into e4, and white goes for the trending main line knight c3. The idea is simple that white wants to exchange black's active knight on e4 and he wants to be able to recapture on c3 with the d pawn so that later on he can play bishop e3, queen d2 and go for long castle quickly. Black of course takes on c3, d into c3, bishop e7, black prepares for short castle, bishop e3. Now even though black can go for short castle, he doesn't need to do it immediately, though short castle in this position is one of the main lines. In this game, Caruana opts for development of his queenside pieces before going for short castle. So Caruana starts by developing his knight to c6. White plays queen d2. That's the standard plan for white. He wants to go for long castle quickly and then start pushing his pawns on the king side, creating some attacking chances on the king side. Black goes for bishop f5, developing his bishop on an active square. White goes for long castle and black plays queen d7. Now this is a very interesting approach by Caruana. He plays bishop e7 but he doesn't go for short castle. I think the idea behind Caruana's moves with knight c6, bishop f5 and queen d7 is he wants to keep his chances open for both long castle as well as short castle and kind of confuse Wesley and keep him guessing on which side he's going to castle. So after queen d7, white plays h3. This is a typical move in this pawn structure. At some point, white would love to play g4 and create some attacking chances on the king side. That's the reason why h3 is a move that white usually goes for. Black castles and white plays a prophylactic move, king b1. Black plays rook e8, bringing his rook on the open e file. White plays knight d4. Now this is again a standard move as well, because if white plays g4 immediately, moves like bishop e4 can be really annoying, creating pressure along the diagonal. So white decides to first eliminate this knight, kind of exchange the knight from the f3 knight for the c6 knight, and then later on he can think for pushing the pawns all the way with g4, f4, f5 and so on. After knight d4, black exchanged the knight on d4, bishop into d4, and black retreated his bishop back to f8. This opens up the e file for the rook, which can be handy in the future. White develops his bishop to e2 and black starts throwing pawns on the queen side immediately with a5. Now a5 doesn't give black amazing attacking chances, but this is the way you play for an attack in opposite side castling. You start pushing your pawns, or you try to bring the pieces on the opposite side of the board and create some chances, create some attacking chances. Right now white's queen side is not having any weaknesses, but if we start pushing pawns, we can try to create some hooks, some weaknesses in on white's queen side, and that's how you get a weakness and then you start hitting that weakness and create some amazing attacking chances. So black goes for a5, white plays g4, and Caruana retreated the bishop to e6. Now this is the most logical move in the position. We would like to place the bishop on e6 so that it points towards white's queen side, but white gets a chance to play c4 and block the bishop on e6. That is what happened in the game, but a clever way to place the bishop would have been to first play bishop e4, attacking the rook, and if white plays something like f3, then black can play bishop to d5. Now the difference is that if white now plays c4, this in fact seems like a better version for white, but black has a very cool move in this position. Black can play queen e6, attacking both the bishop on e2 and the pawn on c4. If white takes on d5, black takes on e2, and we can see that black has managed to activate his queen and infiltrate on the second rank, and this would have been the better version for black. So that's the reason why it was better. It was slightly clever to first play bishop to e4 and then play bishop d5 so that we get a chance to play queen e6 in the case white plays c4. Anyways, black goes for bishop e6 straight away and white plays c4. Black plays d5. Black's main intention is to try and open up the queen side as quickly as possible, so black goes for d5. White plays c5 and black plays b6. There's simply no break in action on the queen side. Caruana wants to open up lines even at the cost of a pawn. White plays queen c3. Naturally, so Wesley wants to keep the lines closed. He doesn't want to take on b6, but in fact taking on b6 was the best decision for white. If c into b6, white can take on b6 and then retreat back to d4, when even though black has managed to open up the b file, he is not getting much, since the bishop on d4 acts as a very good defender to the b2 pawn, and black's attacking chances would be not that great. Black can in fact also try to play the move c5, which is interesting, attacking the bishop and then intending to later on win the pawn on b6. But here white has bishop e5, and if we play something like queen c6, white can put his bishop on c7, and this pair of the pawn on b6 and the bishop on c7 is really solid, and it's really tough to crack it. So white is doing quite fine even in this position. Later on he can think of playing bishop f3 and hitting the d5 pawn. So this would have been this was a better way for Caruana to defend for Wesley So to defend on the queen side, but instead he plays the move queen c3, simply defending the c5 pawn. But this gives black an amazing opportunity to create an initiative on the queen side. So Caruana starts with b into c5, bishop c5, and now he could have exchanged the bishop straight away, then maybe play rook b8 and try to find some attacking chances along the b file. But he plays a clever maneuver first. He replaces the queen from d7 to b7 so that he can exert more pressure on the b2 pawn, and he does so by first playing queen c6. If white decides to exchange on f8, then after queen into c3, b into c3 and king into f8, it is clear that white's pawns on c2 and c3, they are double pawns and they are a big weakness for him, which will be really annoying for him in the upcoming endgame. So Wesley decides to play bishop d4, Caruana plays queen b7, and So plays bishop c5 again. But now we can see a huge difference. The queen from d7 has landed on b7, which is much better placed on the b file. Caruana continues by exchanging the bishops and then playing rook b8, threatening checkmate in 1. Of course, Wesley So was aware of that. He played b3. But now we have got a hook. Whenever opponent pushes a pawn on the side of the board where he is not the strongest, it is considered an hook, and we can then try and open lines on that side of the board. So after b3, it gives black the opportunity to play a4 and maybe open up the a file in the future. And that is what Caruana does immediately. He plays a4 straight away with the idea to open up the a file for the a8 rook. White plays rook d4. We can already see that with a lot of forcing moves, Caruana has managed to open up lines and place his pieces perfectly on the queen side. Even though there are not much pieces remaining on the board, the open lines on the queen side are sufficient for Caruana to create sufficient attacking chances. So rook d4, a into b3, opening up the a file, a into b3, and Caruana plays rook a7. Clearly with the idea to double on the a file. King b2, while black plays rook ba8, threatening rook a to check. So Wesley plays rook b1 and Caruana first plays rook a5, stopping the rook one square before and then going for the move rook a2. So after rook a5, rook b4, so Wesley is aiming to go for an endgame as quickly as possible. If rook into c5, rook into b7, and we reach an endgame, that is what Caruana doesn't want. He wants to checkmate opponent's king, so of course he preserves his queen with queen c8. So Wesley plays rook b5, rook a to check, and here the best move for white was obviously king c1, keeping the king behind the pawn on c2, and the rook on b1 near to the white king, the queen on c5, the rook on b5 are kind of sufficient to defend against any immediate onslaught against the white's king. But so Wesley decides to play king c3. a slightly aggressive, energetic way to defend, but this also carries a lot of risk. And if black manages to somehow bring his queen in action, so Wesley is going to face a lot of problems, and that is exactly what Caruana manages to do. So king c3 was a terrible mistake. He played. Caruana started with with bishop d7, kicking the rook from b5, rook b4, rook a5, queen e7, c5, attacking the rook and gaining space on the queen side. The pawns are coming near to the white king now, and this was the final mistake by Wesley. So he played rook f4. Now this seems very logical because white threatens to take the pawn on f7, but a better move for so Wesley was to maintain the rook on the b file with rook b8 with rook b6. The point is that rook on b6 manages to somehow hold the black queen from coming near white's king. So that's why rook b6 was essential, covering keeping the b8 square under control. So black doesn't have options like queen b8. And if black tries to bring the queen with queen c7, white can then play queen d6, blocking the queen yet again, and everything would be under control. In fact, this position is more or less balanced. It is more or less equal despite white's poor king position. So c5, this was the final blunder by Wesley. So of course, in time pressure, it is really tough to it is simply impossible to criticize him, because in seconds you play the most logical and the most natural move, which is rook f4. But this led to a quick finish of the game. So Caruana starts with bishop e6, defending the e6 pawn, defending the f7 pawn. White goes for king d2 and black plays queen b8. So this was the main idea, the main winning idea for Caruana, by playing the queen to b8 and then trying to go to e5 or f4. So let's say if white plays rook f3, since the rook was under attack, black can now play queen b4 check, and once the queen joins the action, it is game over, because the queen on e7 is basically doing nothing in the defense. So Wesley goes for king e3, black goes queen e5 check, forcing the king to go to f3, and after king f3 he unleashes the final finishing blow with bishop into g4 check, creating a discovered attack on the e7 queen. And this is how Caruana manages to win the queen and the game as well. So this was a very beautiful attacking game by Caruana. The most important lesson to learn from this is that even though especially in this position he didn't have any attacking chances, seemingly any attacking chances on the queen side, he started pushing his pawns, throwing his pawns in front of opponent's king, and induced some weaknesses, especially when white played b3, induced some weaknesses and then opened lines as quickly as possible on the queen side in front of white's king, and he managed to create amazing attacking chances and win the game as well. I hope you enjoyed this nice attacking game by Caruana. See you in the next video.